Welcome to My Morning Cup, a podcast produced by Costa Media Advisors and brought to you by the generous support of the Tennessee Valley Authority. To learn more about TVA's impact on our community, follow TVA on Instagram at TVA and on Twitter X at TVA News. My Morning Cup, where we have interesting conversations with genuine people. I'm Mike Costa, your host. My guest this week is Darren Hodges. Darren is the Division Vice President of Coca-Cola Bottling Company United here in Chattanooga, the world's first franchise bottler of Coca-Cola. Darren is recognized throughout Chattanooga for his tremendous support for our community, local schools, and athletics. Darren, welcome to My Morning Cup. Before I get you on record as to what your favorite Coca-Cola product is, let me ask, what's in your morning cup?
My morning cup is usually a Coke Zero or a Meliella Zero.
Every morning?
Most mornings, yeah. It's I'm not a coffee drinker. My dad was a truck driver, and everybody thought he was a coffee drinker, and he wasn't. He kept a 1 liter Diet Coke by his side, and so I've always been Coke Zero now instead of Diet Coke, and or Meliella, and a Meliella Zero this morning. So,
what do you find the difference in Coke Zero and Diet Coke that you like better about Coke Zero? And I ask that because my wife is a Diet Coke-aholic, but she switched to Coke Zero.
Coke Zero tastes more like Coca-Cola. It's a lot of people can't tell the difference. I can, but it tastes more like Coca-Cola than Diet Coke does. Diet Coke has its legion of drinkers. Thank the Lord for that. But Coke Zero has been really well-placed, well-timed, and it continues to grow year over year. So,
you are Mr. Coca-Cola in Chattanooga. And Coca-Cola's got a long history in Chattanooga that we're going to talk about. And I want to take this to your career arc. A lot of folks we talk to on My Morning Cup have been in a number of different companies, number of different positions in different companies. But you've been a Coca-Cola guy really since day one. So I really want to talk about that progress starting as a material handler at Coca-Cola Bottling. But before we get there, you grew up here, right?
I did. Grew up in Chattanooga. I was born and raised here, if you will.
Yeah.
Went to Trinity Christian School from K-5 through 12th grade.
Is that still in existence?
It does not. It was over off Bonnie Oaks Drive, and private church school. And some of those have gone by the wayside. It was one that did probably in, I want to say, about 1988.
Yeah. So you grew up here, went to school here, and if I remember correctly, you said you played basketball in high school?
I played basketball in high school. We had a pretty good team. We had better teams before me, but we had some pretty good success in our league that we were in, and enjoyed it. I still enjoy basketball. I tell people I can still shoot, but I just can't get open. So,
well, my problem was I couldn't jump.
Yeah, I couldn't jump real well, but I did all right. So.
I had what was known as a credit card leap, about as high as a credit card is thick. I just couldn't go much higher than that. Did you play any other sports?
A little baseball in high school. Our school had a football team until I got to about 6th or 7th grade, and they got rid of the football program. It was just too expensive.
Yeah.
And, so we didn't have that opportunity. So a little bit of baseball, but mainly just basketball.
So growing up in high school, did you have any part-time jobs that taught you anything, or was it just like mowing yards?
I mowed lawns over each summer until my senior year. And then in my senior year, I got a little part-time job working at a pizza place on 58 Highway that it was kind of one of the first buy one, get one free pizza type places. The person from up in Indiana, I believe, came down and opened it. It didn't stay open a long time. It was probably because it served our competitor's product. Probably the reason it didn't. But
well, I wouldn't have gone there.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously, before I ever went to Coca-Cola, and so it's I worked there, and then I out of high school, I got a job. Still mowed lawns, quite frankly, but then got a job at a shoe store in Eastgate Mall.
Oh,
and I was only there 3 weeks because Coca-Cola called and I thought that sounds like a pretty good place to go. So
that's better than measuring people's feet.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's at least.
Absolutely.
We were talking a little bit earlier before we started recording about entrepreneurship and Chattanooga being an entrepreneur town. Mowing lawns is very entrepreneur.
It is. It's funny. It helps when you have good neighbors.
Yeah.
And then you have a good aunt who has good neighbors. So I had 3 or 4 yards right near my aunt mowed her lawn, and then 3 or 4 near her over in Brainerd. And so it was, you learn a lot doing mowing lawns, and you have different type people who, what they want in their lawn even. So to your point, it is entrepreneurship. It is different things for different people. You mow a lawn for $5 that somebody paid you for back then. Mm-hmm. No one gets their lawn mowed for $5 now, by the way.
Not even edged.
No, not even edged. And then you might mow one right across the street that's easier for $10 just because, somewhat of a negotiating thing. So.
Yeah. And in terms of the entrepreneur aspect of it, you've got to be self-motivated too, because, those 95-degree days, you say, well, I just might wait till tomorrow. But the homeowner doesn't really want that.
No, I had one lawn that I rode my bike and pulled my mower a couple
that's
of miles
the quintessential picture.
Yes, it was kind of fun. So
so you have a rope and you're riding your bike and pulling it behind it.
No, I just had my hand on the mower. Hey, it's probably police probably pull you over today for it.
So you're industrious in high school, and it comes time for college. Where you go to college?
I had a scholarship to Tennessee Temple University. Yep. I had a valedictorian scholarship out of high school, and went there my first year, and transferred to UTC my sophomore year, and worked my way through college at Coca-Cola. So I took the 4-year plan and did it in 5 years.
Oh, you too.
I did, yeah. It was interesting because, your advisors are telling you can't work a lot of hours and do this. And you think, well, I can, and then you really can't. But so I would end up getting down to 12 or 15 hours each semester. And then when you do that, it's just going to take longer. So, I transferred to UTC my sophomore year. So obviously I'm a big Mocs fan and love UTC athletics, and finished my college days there. So
well, how did you start at Coca-Cola? I know you said you were working at the shoe store and you did applied to Coke. So if you can go back to that, because that's where it all starts for you.
Yeah. So a man at my church, his name was Bill Reed. He worked at Coca-Cola, and then my uncle's brother, Walt Crisp, worked at Coke with Bill. And Walt mentioned to Bill that he thought I would be looking for a better job, and Bill brought an application to my church and said, hey, why don't you fill this out, and somebody may call you. And sure enough, a couple of weeks later, they called myself and another person at our church, another young man. He and I started, I think, a day apart. Both of us from the same. He had transferred his senior year of high school to go to Temple, and both of us, the same church, started Coke about the same time.
So what did you go in as?
Material handler. Worked in the warehouse building pallets, and it's what we would call an entry level position today, and did then even. Back then it was a great job for college because it was second shift. We started about 3:30. Most nights except Friday we were off by 9. Now that sounds like a great gig unless you are going to college. So, but for most of us, I think there were about 20 of us back there, and I think 16 of us were in college. So we had a motivation to get the work done and finish in enough time to get some studies done.
Probably developed some great camaraderie with your guys too, huh?
Yeah, we did, and it's interesting. There's a general sales manager at a local car lot worked with us there. I ran into him the other day. A service manager at that same car lot worked with us. So still people I'm in touch with today. So it was really good for me.
Now, the guys I knew not here at Chattanooga Coke, I grew up in Memphis, they always had great softball teams.
They talk about the legendary softball teams and basketball teams at Coke, but in the warehouse, we didn't get those opportunities because they were doing those after work, So
you guys were working.
Yeah, so
I figured they'd want you guys because you're all big, strapping, strong guys.
Well, all the route guys, they were a little older, and I think they were trying to continue their legendary in their minds careers. So we didn't get a lot of those opportunities. There's some bowling leagues that some of them had an opportunity to do. So, there were times when we'd get through with work and we'd go to a gym and play some ball, or we'd go play some racquetball down at UTC and stuff. But
I want to talk more about your transition through Coca-Cola, but I also want to go back to Coke's history, Chattanooga, because you're celebrating 125 years, in Chattanooga. And one of the things we were talking about earlier was how entrepreneurship has been in Chattanooga's bloodline for more than those 125 years. But you made an important point. It wasn't necessarily that Coke did a tremendous amount for Chattanooga, but Chattanooga had to be there for Coke too.
Yeah, the two attorneys that were here already in Chattanooga, they wanted to bottle their favorite soft drink, which was Coca-Cola. You could only get in a fountain at the time, as I say, legally, because there were folks who were putting in bottles in places, and so they wanted it in bottles, and so they kept going to Atlanta and talking to Mr. Candler about it, and finally he sold them the rights to do so.
He didn't believe it would work, did he?
He did not believe it would work. He thought it was a failed attempt, and so he sold them the rights for $1.
Wow.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I think if we did the math the other day, $1 back then would be worth, I want to say it's like $9,400 or something dollars.
Yeah.
So in today's terms, they bought Coca-Cola for that. I mean, it's whatever the dollar is today.
And it's worth a little bit more than
a little bit, I'm sure. And so,
yeah.
But those two guys, you and I talked about a Rotary talk we gave a few weeks ago, and a lot of what you see in Chattanooga is related to Coca-Cola. I mean,
yeah.
You don't have to go any further than the aquarium and see what Mr. Lupton did there to help. And when those two gentlemen came back to expand the franchise and to expand into other areas of the country, they needed help. And so Mr. Lupton stepped in and helped with that. And he was obviously a businessman in Chattanooga already, an entrepreneur already. And there was a reason they were here, and it was because it was Chattanooga. And you can go back in history and see that Chattanooga was thriving at the time. And so the two just, to me, go hand in hand. I think Coca-Cola has been really good for Chattanooga, but we wouldn't have probably existed at that point in time. They wouldn't have been here if it weren't just that it was Chattanooga. So, yeah, I think they just go together.
Yeah, they really do. You really can't have one without the other.
No, not really.
So when you started at Coca-Cola, what year was that?
I started in 1986.
So in 86, that's before the aquarium.
Mm-hmm.
It may have been an idea at that point. I don't even know if it was thought of at that point. But Chattanooga was not having the best of times in 86 either. A lot of the manufacturing jobs had left, and the economy was not what we experience today.
No, not at all. And, I remember I tell folks at UTC, like transferred there from Temple, and you didn't go far from UTC's campus because there was nothing to do.
Yeah.
And I stayed at home. I lived at home while I went to college, made it a little cheaper on me.
Oh, yeah.
But even, just leaving campus, there was a place called David's. I don't know if you ever remember or heard David's. And then there was another couple of places close by, but you just didn't go far. And so the downtown atmosphere that we have today that folks love and it's electric and, it's still growing and thriving, it didn't exist then.
Yeah, it was tough times. And those lasted really until the aquarium was conceived and built. So you're at Coca-Cola, you're a material handler, and you're kind of getting into the culture. What was it like to hear about that idea and of the aquarium and Mr. Lupton's support? Was it like, wow, we're really getting into something new here? Or?
We didn't, in our roles, we didn't hear a lot about those things. And Mr. Lupton wasn't involved in our business at all.
Yeah.
So he was just philanthropic, and his family was. A lot of people were. But I got to be honest. Looking back on it, I think most young people then thought aquarium's pretty cool. But really,
in Tennessee, in the middle,
yeah, next to the river, and because you're used to going to a beach somewhere or something for an aquarium. But I think that as a young person, just didn't think about it as grand as it is today, and that it could do what it's done for downtown Chattanooga today.
Well, and I think that's an interesting perspective that you bring, because you were a young person, young adult at that time, and it does hit differently. You've got all these city leaders and philanthropic people saying this is going to be a great idea, and you're kind of looking at it and going, wait a second here, aquarium and you come to the river, I don't get it.
Yeah, and today across the street from aquarium is, I think, our second or third facility that Coca-Cola had in that time. And some of those things have become revitalized, and people recognize them as Coke places because of the aquarium. And so it's been obviously good for Chattanooga, and a lot of fun to see it grow from where I've, been here my whole life. So
I want to go back to you starting at Coca-Cola, material handler. So beyond building pallets, you're driving forklifts, you're loading trucks, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so the way it worked was you started as a material handler, and if a forklift opportunity came open, you grabbed it, and or you applied for it. And so I went from a material handler to a forklift operator, and the reality is you do a lot of different things and
whatever
pull
needs
trucks in, load them, and pull them back out. I mean, just whatever needs to be done, for that day. So,
my one of my little known facts is that I used to teach forklift driver training. Yeah.
Wow. Could you still drive one?
I haven't driven one in probably 30 years, but I may need to come by and see you.
You need to come do it. Yeah.
If this doesn't go the way I hope it goes, I may need that. but yeah, and imagine this: I'm a 25-year-old kid out of college and going into these businesses that have signed up for driver's training, and I've got a guy who's been driving a forklift 30 years, and he's looking at me like going, "Yeah, right. You're not good." And I wasn't teaching him anything. I was just clicking a box.
I drove one, and there's a talent to driving a forklift
because it's
doing
the back
it well.
wheel steering. Yeah,
it is incredible what some of our folks can do on a forklift. And I know you've been in our facility now, and I call it 3 high stacking. Well, it's more than that, and it's almost 3 stories tall that they stack pallets at times, and on our Verticue system, and it's pretty incredible what they do every night and every day, and how much they get done on a forklift. It's pretty incredible.
Yeah, and I know this is jumping ahead, but that whole safety is such a concern in a warehouse that a lot of people who aren't around that every day don't realize how seriously that's taken.
It is extremely serious, and we've seen accidents, and it's always scary when it happens, and we obviously want to minimize those, and have done a lot to minimize them. There's literally an arrow on the floor where the forklift's going now that warns you it's coming, and so it's extremely serious, and even in production lines themselves, it's equipment, and so our folks do a great job of safety, and we're pretty proud of that. So
yeah, and that obviously comes from the top down, and that's why I want to trace your jobs at Coke, because all this has prepared you to lead everyone. You've done about everything there is to do there. So you go from material handler to forklift operator. What comes next for you?
So I got out of college, and I had I got my accounting degree, and the accounting field. I remember when I entered college, a lot of folks. I should have looked around the room and went, "There's way too many people in this room." The accounting field was flooded, and so I interviewed for a job. Had 5 interviews with another industry that I won't mention. And one of the reasons is I knew where Winchester, Tennessee was. It was on the way to where my grandparents lived, and they had a facility there, and didn't get the job. And I remember the question that hurt me at the time that to this day, I know that answer that I gave that caused me to not get it. But I tell people it was somewhat divine intervention that I didn't get it, obviously now. And
can you share with us the question?
I can. It's so, I was asked by so it was a controller trainee position. So it was number crunching. It was all of that. And I like numbers. That's the reason I went into accounting. I don't like the legal side of it, but I like numbers. And so, they asked me a question, said, how do you come into a role like this? And there are folks who have been doing this job for 20, 25 years. And how do you come in on day one and tell them what to do? Kind of like you were talking about. You're coming in and talking to a forklift guy that's driven a forklift for 30 years. Well, you didn't just walk in day one and do that. Mm-mm. You learned it yourself. You found different ways to do things, or you wouldn't be able to advise on that. And so that was my answer. I said, you learn from them first, you earn their respect. And once you do that, you can come back and talk to them about a better way to do things.
Because they got to respect you.
Got to respect you. And I don't know if he didn't hear me right or what, because every time I've told this story, everyone says, "Oh, that's a great answer."
Yeah.
And he was like, hated that answer.
What did he say to you?
He said, "You got to be the boss from day one. You cannot let them run over you." And I went, "I'm not saying they run over you. He said, that would never work." And so we had literally been looking for apartments. My wife now, my fiance at the time, and it was, we decided probably weren't going to need one of those. So
you said it was probably divine intervention. I couldn't agree with you more, because you probably would have gone to work for this person and realized that he was the kind of boss that it was hard to respect.
Yeah, I think so. And the facility that was there is closed today, and so it's a great industry, and one that I respect the companies that do it. But like I said, I felt like that, that, like I said, divine intervention, that I'd still be at Coca-Cola. So
yeah. So you graduate college, you have some job interviews, you're working at Coca-Cola, but you got a college degree. I'm going to see if I'm going to get in my field, and that happens. And did you decide to stay at Coca-Cola at that point and just mentally say, this is the career path I want to go?
Not really the career path. I thought, so I got engaged in December after I graduated from college. And so I just felt like I needed to do something besides the warehouse, and I wanted to grow in my paycheck.
Yeah.
And so sales jobs were opening up, and by sales, I mean utility positions, which were filling in for route folks that work extremely hard as well. And several of the folks who had been in the warehouse with me as material handlers had moved to that department and were encouraging me to come and do that.
Yeah.
So I bid on, if you will, or put in my application for a sales utility position. And at the beginning of the summer and at the end of the summer, I was able to get one of those in 91.
So in addition to filling in for a route person, what does sales utility do? Are they working with the route person, kind of learning the route and what goes into the route position?
Yeah. So utility, at the time we would fill in for all truck delivery, small store delivery, like the convenience stores that you see today. And then we fill in for the large store merchandisers. So more often than not, it was large store merchandisers you were relieving and for their day off or their vacation. And then sometimes you would be on the small store side of it. But you learn from them first, and then you would literally work their days off. And you had to know not only how to merchandise the store, but how to order for the stores and how to sell to the manager of the store. So you're learning the role in the utility position, so you're prepared for it when one of those routes come open, if you will.
Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of merchandising? Because I'm imagining that when you say the large stores, it's the guy you see in the Publix stocking the shelves and making sure that the right products are in the right place, the eye level, that kind of thing. What all goes into that?
More than you think. So that's exactly what it is. And so there's a behind the scenes, if you will, we call it picture of success of what each store should look like, what brands go where, what the brand flow is. We get a lot of help from the Coca-Cola company on that. And because they obviously have the brands that they want to push, and they're the marketing geniuses of the world. And so a lot of that comes from them. And then from a local level, we're able to, okay, we think that this is doing better, or this is doing better, and we can adjust our shelves and our sets accordingly. But yeah, that's exactly as you described it. It's that person stocking those shelves in those stores. And then they also sell to the store in Chattanooga. We have some areas where we have separate salespeople come in, but in Chattanooga, the same person merchandising the store is doing the selling of what the picture of success should look like. So if we have a promotion coming in Publix in the next 2 weeks, they're going to sell it in this week.
Who are they selling to? They selling to the store manager, or to a buyer at the?
It's already sold to the buyer.
Okay.
So we have corporate teams that we have a Publix team, and our company Coca-Cola United has someone sitting on that team. So the buyer's already seen it, already approved it. Now you've got to go negotiate that space still at the store level, because the store manager ultimately owns that store and owns the execution of it.
You know, I did some, in my broadcast career, I did some vendor programs and called on grocery stores. And what you realize real quick is the grocery business is really the real estate business.
It absolutely is.
You're negotiating space.
Yep.
And the manager is the king of that space.
The manager's the king, and the grocery manager is the prince. So.
Yeah. So when you say they're selling to the store and explaining why we need an end cap display and we're going to build this design and that kind of thing, or is it just space? Or
so the space is somewhat. Most of our customers do what we call a space to sales pattern. So if you walk into a large store and see the amount of space we have, you can kind of do a percentage in your head and say this is how much business they do. But then from a display perspective, that's what you're really trying to sell is those displays, extra end caps, extra space for the ad. You know, for instance, if you're running a buy two, get two 12-pack, that's a hot ad. I need more cases on the floor than I do if it's just a typical 2 for something or like that.
So in the sales utility position, you're learning basically how to be a route person.
Exactly.
But you have to know everyone's route and all the different people on it, because you could be filling in for Charlie this week and Pam next week.
Exactly. And at the time, our division was Chattanooga. So and we still are very centralized, but it was the Chattanooga Sales Center. Since then, we picked up our Chattanooga Sales Center alone, picked up a North Georgia area, and then now another area in North Georgia in Rome. And so it's gotten a lot bigger. So knowing those routes is key, and knowing the people who run them, because you also don't want to fill in that day and the person come back in and say, my store looked terrible when they did it, because you want to have a good reputation, being a good relief person. So
well, and particularly on the route salesperson, those relationships are critical, aren't they? Because having that good relationship with that store manager or the grocery manager can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah, and our relief people and our route folks, you can tell when you go in. It's funny. They sometimes they call you Coke man or Coke lady, and that's just as important as knowing your first name, Mike.
Yeah,
because they want to know who you represent, and they have and you can tell pretty quickly if that relationship's being built or not. And most of our folks are extremely good at it.
When you got into it, so you're in sales utility. What was the transition for you to route sales? Or was it?
Yeah, I was a utility person. Let's see, from I went into that in about October of 91, and I think I took my first route in around 94, 95. And in that day, turnover, we didn't see turnover back then like we do today in any jobs, much less the Coke industry, the soft drink industry. And so a route coming open in that time was crucial really to growing in your career. And so I took
That's what you
first
aspired
route.
to, right?
Yeah, I took a route down in the Rossville, Georgia area. And again, I've got my accounting degree, and I'm thinking, okay, what am I really doing? But I also know that I'm doing okay. I was supporting my wife and she had a small job at the time, and so I was doing okay, and so I was enjoying what I was doing too. Yeah. To your point, the relationships I was building were a lot of fun. I mean, you get to know folks in their stores that own the stores in a lot of cases. Like there was a place called Atkins Superette between Rossville and Chattanooga Valley, and you get to know the owners, and the owner's son's in the hospital, and you go visit them there. I mean, it's part of your life at that point.
Yeah, you're building friendships, and you're in business together.
Yeah, that's correct. You are, and you have to know what is important to them, and what's important to them may not be important to the person to block down the street.
Yeah. You brought up an interesting thing when you're talking about route sales, and that, I guess, discussion you have in your head. Wait a second, I got an accounting degree and I'm doing route sales. Did I go to college for this kind of thing? And how did you hang on to that long-term vision, because where you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, fortunately, I was able to see our area managers at the time. And Gary Davis was our division vice president at the time. And a lot of people in Chattanooga know Gary, and he's still on the radio every week. And so you could see this live and see some folks that you said, okay, if I hang in here long enough, I may be able to do that. And so I think that started becoming a little bit of my goal was, okay, how do I work my way to that position? Because I also recognized that while I had an accounting degree, accounting is more than just numbers. And I'm so thankful I've got a great accountant who works in our offices today. So I understand the financial statement, but I don't have to live in it like he does. So it's I
know that feeling.
Yeah, it's good. And so I think I started recognizing that I could make a career out of it if I just was patient and put in the work, if you will. So.
Were the folks at Coca-Cola Bottling encouraging? Like, would they have conversations with you? Here's where this could ultimately lead for you, or
I think that back then it was not as common to do that.
Yeah.
I think it was more driven by you recognizing it
by example.
Yeah, and so we would see folks promoted from a route to a manager's position, and that's still very common today. That we have internal promotions. And so when you see that, you don't really have to have as many conversations. Now, they're more often today because the turnover exists today. But back then, because the turnover wasn't that much, you're not really having to have that, conversation every day, if you will. Now, the conversations obviously took place, but not on a, everyday basis like really associates expect today. So,
well, and that's an excellent point. The companies that that's their strength of promoting from within. It's all by example.
Yeah.
If you could see your peers being promoted or being rewarded for good work, you're going to be encouraged and want to stay there. But if you see people getting passed over and everyone coming out, it's a little bit different story.
That's right. And Gary was a master at it, quite frankly. And he, there were times you'd go, well, why did that person get promoted and I didn't? But the reality was someone was getting promoted within your friends or cohorts, if you will. And so that was good to see.
Yeah, probably someone you respected and you recognized, well, you know what, they deserve that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always hard to be passed over, but when you look and you say, well, that person really worked hard and deserved that, there's a little bit more understanding. Yeah. So how long do you do route sales?
So I got promoted to business development manager in late 97, around November of 1997. And our business development managers take on some varieties of roles. And my role was actually schools and youth parks. And as I tell folks, it was back in the day when it was okay to sell a Coke machine into a school. And, and we had a lot of schools who were doing soft drinks through their vending machines. And my role was to help them maximize that. And obviously it helped us as well, but we have a lot of investment in our schools. And so we also want to somewhat try to get our return on investment as well. And so my role was that, and the way it was working at the time was our fountain area managers were handling all of that. So not only were they handling the people on the routes, but they were handling all the accounts, and rightfully so from a restaurant perspective and some of those. But the youth parks and the schools were growing, and the opportunity was growing. So that was my first management role.
In doing that, were you talking to the principals, the school system, all the above?
Yeah, all the above.
Yeah.
So you get to know superintendents, but the principal is like the store manager.
Yeah,
they're making the decision at the school level, and each school has their own goals and what they want to get done. For instance, I can pick on LeBron Sturkey because I still know him extremely well, and he's somewhat of a legendary principal in Chattanooga. And his idea at Hunter Middle School of how he wanted to use his funds from his Coke machines were a little different than somebody else, and we were we were sponsors of his some of his learning things that he was doing and leadership things that he was doing as well, and trying to help him with that. So,
well, let's talk about that a second. About it. And I don't think it's unique to Chattanooga. All across the country is very involved in communities and schools. And you can't go to a football game without seeing the scoreboard with the Coca-Cola ad on it. Yeah. Why is that such a big part of Coca-Cola's approach to the community?
I can speak for us and at Coke United specifically. Our mission statement says we exist for our associates, for the benefit of our associates, customers, consumers, communities, and then owners. And
I like that you put associates first.
Yeah, it is. It's always been that way. I mean, the mission statement hasn't changed. And if you notice, it's associates first and owners last.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, you go, wow, that's really important. But if you also just think through associates, customers, consumers, communities, owners, those first four, the associates, customers, communities, and consumers, are all in the community.
Yeah.
So it's important that you are supportive of the community. If not, the community is not going to support you. And so I think that's been the vision from day one, and especially in Chattanooga.
Yeah.
What probably started out as a marketing thing, the Coca-Cola logo on the wall at the lookouts, Coca-Cola on scoreboards everywhere. And that's important. We want our brand out there. I think it has developed into the community side more than the marketing side, because it's valuable that community, young people see you in the community so that you're attractive to them, so that they want to come to work for you down the road.
Mm-hmm. It keeps you top of mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's after route sales?
Route sales, BDM was that first management role, business development manager. And then I went from a business development manager position to, at the time we called it cold drink manager. Now it's called an on-premise manager. And so it was over the business development managers. And I took that role in, I think it was 2001 that I took that role, maybe 2000. But we had an associate who left that role and I took it. And we call it on-premise sales manager now. Like so the business development managers report to that. So you have all of the on-premise world at that point, all the restaurants, all the service department and all of that at that point.
So is it at this point you're looking where you had the conversation with yourself, about, well, I got an accounting degree. I don't know why I'm doing this. At this point, do you go, I got a pretty good gig going and a really good career here?
Yeah, I think so. And it's even if I had stayed in that role, it was a fun role. Our on-premise business, especially in the South, is really a lot of fun. And when you think about an on-premise account, the University of Tennessee is an on-premise account. UTC is an on-premise account. And to get to be involved with those type customers, it's just fun.
Yeah.
I mean, it is just fun. So not only was I thinking, I can make a career out of Coca-Cola, I was having fun doing it. I mean, and getting to, again, relationship building. And I tell folks, if we just understood how great our relationships were, we may never have to sell anything, but we do have competitors, so we have to be careful. But
I'm not aware of any.
I don't know I'm here. But that was important as well, was just building those relationships.
Well, like on the on-premise stuff in UTC or UTK, was the fun sports related or just being around college students in that atmosphere? Or
more, I guess, the sports side of it, and getting to know Dr. Angle, for instance.
Yeah,
he's such a good guy, and being around him and seeing how he thinks, and so a lot of just learning from them, quite frankly, and then the sports side of it. When I was in college, I was at UTC, and I thought, it'd be really cool to have season tickets to UTC basketball.
Yeah,
I mean, it was the Gerald Wilkins days, for Pete's sake. He
was pretty good,
cool, wasn't it? Yeah. And now you're like, now in my role, I'm like, I have to have tickets. That's just a shame, right? But it's so it was very rewarding in that, and I think being a local person, it was even better for me because I got to, still be involved in a lot of the schools, but our restaurant business in this area and the Southeast, and specifically in Chattanooga, getting to know restaurant owners. I've got dear friends that own restaurants in Chattanooga. And so it's, I think that not only was it saying I could see myself in a career here, it was the relationships I was building along the way.
Yeah, and I get the fun part with the tickets because being in broadcasting, we were always doing promotions and getting tickets. My kids were fortunate that they got to see Barney a number of times and Thomas the Tank Engine because we were promoting those things. And, that was the thing that made the stress of the job fun.
Yeah, I tell people my daughter, she'll turn 23 in November. And I said, whoever she marries is in trouble because she's been to so many Alabama football games and seen that side of it, they're going to be in trouble. So,
quick side story. I got tickets one year to the Country Music Awards through ABC, and I took my daughters and my wife, and we let our daughters invite two friends, and my daughters kind of walk in like, oh, our seats are all the way back here. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You're at the CMAs.
I know it.
You're right. They get a little bit spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
Then you get into being retail sales manager. Describe that.
So retail sales manager is the opposite of the on-premise side. It's the retail side of the world in Walmarts and Publix and Food City, Bi-Lo at the time, and convenience stores. And so it's really out there selling to those customers, as you said, negotiating space and selling your brands versus your competitors' brands and why you should have your space. And I did that from 2003 till 2013.
Oh, that's a long time.
Yeah. And I went into that role with the folks who were in the key account manager roles, as we call them, were very tenured associates. They've been doing it a long time. And kind of going back to that day that I didn't get the other job, I really learned from them for the first 6 months or so. And was my financial and numbers background helped them a little bit. And then the selling side, they taught me. So I think we were all good for each other, if you will. And we've been, several of those have retired now, but a couple of that went into roles like our Walmart rep at the time is now our retail sales manager. And we have an associate who was our representative for Circle K, who had Circle K, now it's Kangaroo then. He is our Food City rep today. And so we've all grown up together in the business, and it's been like relationships, and it's just fun doing so. But the retail sales manager side was really good for me because it taught me a lot about selling.
What did it teach you that you didn't realize at the time?
Well, in on-premise, now in some ways on-premise is more difficult because it's usually an all or nothing scenario. Like you don't usually see us and our competitor both at a school.
Yeah, that's true.
And in a restaurant, it's usually us or our competitor. And on the retail side, you got to deal with a competitor.
Yeah.
And so it's a little more difficult at times, in that, they're going to be walking in the door after you, or they've been in the door before you.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to have you have to have your A game in every call, as but you really got to be prepared for the questions, because your competitor has thrown something out there that you may or may not be prepared for. And our teams were usually pretty good at anticipating what those buyers were asking for.
And I would imagine your accounting background helped you out with that too, in terms of preparing the data.
Yeah. So we, the tools that we have today versus then, had to dig a lot for the data back then, but it did. And like I said, I think I was helpful to them, because a lot of it was just relationship selling back then. And now from a data standpoint, we're coming in with data on top of relationships. And I tell our folks, we've learned that if you don't have the relationship, someone's not going to listen to your data. You have all the data you want, but if you don't have the relationship, they really don't want to see you.
People like to do business with people they like, know, and trust.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so building those relationships is really important. I know Gary Davis has been a big influence on your life, and you end up replacing Gary.
I did, and I was fortunate to get to do that. In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I guess around the middle of August, I had a leadership academy in Atlanta, and I was fortunate and asked to speak from the stage in a panel about associate development and succession planning. Because as I look ahead the next 7 to 10 years, there are about 20 of us in my division alone, from what I do and the folks who work directly with me, who are probably going to retire about the same time. And so part of my associate development piece that I put together really was, and we showed it in Atlanta to 270, 300 people, picture Gary Davis at the top of it.
Yeah.
And I said, Gary was a mentor before the term mentor was really cool. And a lot of times we didn't know that's what he was doing with us. He would take me to meetings with him, and I'd sit in on these meetings, and I'm like, why am I here? You fast forward 5, 6, 7 years, and you're going, okay, this is why I'm here. But the one thing he really did for us was he gave us ownership and gave us the ability to make decisions, knowing what we may or may not make a decision on, but gave us that freedom to do so, and would help coach us through it if we made the wrong one. And Gary was I don't want to say a tough boss, but he was intense.
Yeah.
Still is an intense person. If people that don't know him, he's an intense person. But it was so good for me because I could see him go through processes and how he looked at things. And a lot of us learned so much from him. And so as I looked around the room in Atlanta, and I put on the flow chart, if you will, I had Gary at the head and of the flow chart, and I had 5 of us in the room that day. And there were more in the room that Gary's been influential over. It's like you look around the room and see his influence, and it's incumbent upon us to continue that. It's not something that we can just take lightly. We owe it to people like him to continue that, because of what he did for us.
So each step along the way for you, you've been picking up something that you used in your next position, or building relationships, or that mentorship. And what would you say to someone coming in to, whether it's your organization as a young person now, or going anywhere, in terms of finding a mentor? I mean, do you purposely go out and find a mentor, or is it something that happens more organically?
So our company has gotten pretty good at this. It was happening more organically, and now it still does. There's a couple that I'm mentoring right now, just organically, if you will. But we also have a mentorship program. And so we have folks sign up to be mentors and folks sign up to be mentees. And we try to assign based off of what the folks say their interests are in the company. And so that's working pretty well. And I think that the folks who have signed up for it, the mentors are getting probably more out of it even than the mentees are, because you can see that, we hear a lot about generations and about associates and what they want to do and what they don't want to do. But the reality is we have a lot of associates who want to be successful, and most of them do. And so when you see their passion towards, it may not be the same direction that you were taking or the same ideas that you have, but they're still very passionate. And when you see that, it does your heart well, and makes you want to continue doing what you're doing. And so our company's gotten really good at somewhat laying it out and helping us with it. And so you're not out there going, okay, well, what do I tell them on this? So we have a mentor help hint of the month, if you will, or of the week that comes our way too. So
yeah, you said something that I find very, very true, that the mentor gets as much, if not more, from the relationship, because it is very rewarding, because you're not only helping someone grow, you're watching them grow.
Yeah. We have a manager trainee program. So the ownership of our company, Coca-Cola United, for those that don't know, is a family-owned company. We're I think the largely held private bottler in the maybe the world. I know we are in the country, and so before a member of the family can come into the business, they have to work outside of the company
That's
first,
smart. And
then they come into the business. And so I'll use Beelan Nielsen as an example. And I had him on the list, by the way. He went through this program with Gary, and you do everything in the business. So Beelan worked in the warehouse. He drove a forklift. He worked on a production line. He's done everything in the business before he ever can say, I'm really going to work for Coca-Cola United.
Yeah.
And so we're expanding that a little bit to some other folks. And I've got one right now in Chattanooga that's going through that. And the key with that is when you watch them, to your point, when you get to see them grow, and, sometimes it takes them a while to understand what the role is, but more often than not, what you're really looking for is how they're relating to people. And, when you see that click and folks start understanding what each person's role is and how each person's role fits into the organization, that's when you start seeing it pretty special.
I really like that. I mean, I've gotten a lot out of working with folks over my career, so I get why that is so rewarding. A couple more questions for you before we got to wrap up. I know you're involved with the county government's program to refurbish athletic fields. I was driving on 24 yesterday and drove by Howard.
Yeah,
that looks gorgeous.
Isn't it though?
Why is that so important?
So for me, just a little backstory. I've got, like I said, I got 7 to 10 years left, and I have an unbelievable team. I have 4 sales centers. Chattanooga is just one of them. The leaders in those sales centers are very tenured and very, very good leaders. Our sales center manager in Rome, Georgia, is 41-year associate. Been in Rome all but 2 of those years, and so it gives me the freedom to be able to get involved in some things that I've been passionate about.
Yeah.
And I was serving on the Fund for Excellence board, which is a fundraising arm of the Hamilton County Schools. And during the pandemic, coming out of the pandemic, we did not, as a company, lay off anyone. And there were other bottlers who, the first month after the pandemic, went, we got to go cut heads.
Well, yeah, keep in mind that grocery stores weren't, if they were opening, they were only letting 5 people in at a time. So your sales had to just crater.
It was awful for a few months. And then it got pretty good. Yeah. And so out of the pandemic, we started losing drivers, and we were smart to not lay anyone off. We actually kept hiring. But the great resignation, if you will, started happening. And I went and sat down not long after Justin Robertson got his role, and sat down with him and talked about Coke. And he said, I don't know if our students know that you're an option coming out of high school. And it really broke my heart because I came out of high school to Coca-Cola. Yeah. And a lot of folks I knew did. And so we started talking about how we can somewhat not just get our name out there, but again, this is to provide jobs for people down the road. And so not to belabor it, we decided to get involved with the Future Ready Institutes, and we talked about doing a logistics Future Ready Institute, and they already had someone that was about to step in and do it, and now we know it was U.S. Express, and okay, that's the right thing to do. So, right. But they still talk to us about doing one. So we are doing a Future Ready Institute at Hickson High School, and it has been so rewarding to us. And my friend Susan Harris was at Rock City at the time. She said, Darren, you better find somebody to give it to, because it's going to be so much time for you. And she was right about the time, but I'll tell you, I'm still extremely involved in it, and I want to keep it that way for a while because I've gotten a lot out of it. But what that's led to is a relationship with Justin, in that, in the Fund for Excellence. And I'm now an advisor on it. I'm not on the board right now, but he said, I'd like for you guys to take this project on. And so then I met with Mayor Wamp as well, and we talked through it. And so he and the county were working together on this project. And so it's a project that was passionate to them. And if you think about our schools, we call it level the playing field. You look around, it's not just private schools. It is all of Knox County.
Mm-hmm.
All of Knox County's turf fields.
Are they really?
All of it. And Pilot did that. And so they had that means to do it, and they did it. And in North Georgia, I can't think of a field that's not turf in North Georgia.
You're right. I can't either.
And so, you can get into the semantics of which is safer. The NFL right now has these conversations going on. And my daughter and I had the conversation in Tuscaloosa a year or two ago. And she's like, Dad, if it's grass in Alabama, why would you want turf here? And I said, well, think about it. They're playing 8 to 10 games here, tops. That field at that high school is being used every single day, 2 to 3 times a day. It's not just football. It's football, soccer, now lacrosse.
Band.
And then on the weekend, oh, by the way, the youth league is going to be there. And so what we're running into is like at Ooltewah, they've got a new turf field. On Friday night, if it starts raining, Ooltewah Youth Association can't use that field on Saturday because they're not, they can't. Tear it up. So now they can continue to use it because it's a turf field. That's sort of the passion behind it is providing something for every student that they have the same means and capabilities and that others have in other counties, if you will.
I'm glad you expressed it like that because I think to the average person, they just see it as, well, that's for the high school football team one day a week. The reality is, no, that thing's being used every day in a lot of different ways. And to your point, it's opening it up to a lot of people that you're able to do that.
Yeah, and if Tim James were here, he would tell you what they're doing at CSLA. So as the county builds new schools, so Tyner High School will open with a new turf field. As they build schools, they're doing it. So CSLA, when they moved, they put a turf field there, and they're actually able to lease that field to soccer teams, if you will. That local, there's a lot of soccer leagues around Chattanooga, and they're able to lease that field, and actually helps them pay for other things inside their school that they may not be able to do otherwise. So for us, it's and for me, I guess specifically, it's something I want to see through to help the school system. I think what my daughter just started teaching at Tyner, and seeing what our teachers are dealing with and what our schools, they've got a lot to deal with. And so if this is one thing we can help them with, then so be it. So if My Morning Cup, wants to buy a field, we'll put your logo on the field that says My Morning Cup on it.
That, you know what? That may be a deal. I'm glad you went through that. I do have one last question for you, but before I get to that, I need to remind our listeners who makes all of this possible. It's the Tennessee Valley Authority, and I thank them for sponsoring My Morning Cup. Follow TVA on social media to learn more about its multifaceted mission of service, and visit TVA.com/do good here to explore exciting TVA career opportunities. All right, Darren, last question. What would you tell that 25-year-old Darren Hodges is important for a happy life?
Let me see if I can answer it this way. I've been doing these listening sessions this year. I started, so once a quarter, I try to meet with every associate who's 90 days or less in our business. And then in the first quarter, for instance, we met with all associates 20 years and over. And it's not required, but if you want to come sit down and have a conversation, I want to do that with you. And I had a young lady in one of our sales centers ask me, said, I've already identified this is a place I want to be in your company. And we have our own print shop, and she wants to work in the print shop. She said, what's it going to take for me to get there? And I said, well, the first thing you need to do is show up to work every day. And that's key.
Yeah, that's important.
And then, on those days when you are like, I don't want you coming when you're sick, but if you're just like, I'm just kind of tired today, don't be that person. Come on in, do your job, and look for opportunities to advance. And so I think if I were to go back and give myself that same advice, it would just be patient.
Yeah.
And I was forced to be patient. And today, folks are so many things are at your fingertips. If I want to listen to a podcast from my morning cup, I can go do that really fast.
Yeah.
So many things are right there at our fingertips that the expectation today is that this is going to happen for me really fast. And for a company like ours to continue to promote from within, which is the right thing to do, if you're developing associates and giving them the tools to be successful, then there has to be some patience that comes along with it. But we've also got to show them the career path and what is going to be available if they're patient.
Yeah.
And so to tell a 25-year-old Darren, it would just be patient.
Well, I'm so glad you were patient because it's benefited Chattanooga, and I know it's benefited Coca-Cola Bottling United. I'm really glad you came in and we had this discussion. Thank you.
Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you having me, and tell folks all the time, to grow up in Chattanooga and understand what Coca-Cola is, and now to get to be a part of it, it's really pretty special.
Thanks for listening to My Morning Cup, a podcast by Costa Media Advisors. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend. I release a new episode each week, so be sure to subscribe on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you listen to podcasts.